Birthday has came and went. Next Best Bet is back with another episode, 56. We're heading into July 4th weekend. Part of why I love my birthday so much, Brett, it's just back to back with July 4th. And we got some sports going on this weekend, including the Nathan's hot dog eating contest, which we learned you can bet on. Maybe we'll give out some hints of what we thought about today. Quick hindsight with Higgins, we didn't give anything out last week, but I did post a Korean baseball bet on our Instagram the other night that did not win. However, I have been having some luck trying the waters with some Chinese basketball and some other leagues. I'm going to start posting some more international bets as we ramp up to getting our American sports going. Brett, how are we doing? What you looking forward to this weekend?
Oh man, I'm doing well, and I'm definitely looking forward to some basketball being played. Competitive basketball going on in Columbus, Ohio. The TBT is back. I personally will be rooting for Boeheim's Army, but I'm excited to
Absolutely.
see a lot of my guys out there. Joe Johnson playing for Overseas Elite. I worked with Joe Johnson in Brooklyn his final year. I was there when they let him go. And Joe was a great dude, so I'm excited to see him on a basketball court. I What could be better than sports coming back? And you mentioned it, the hot dog contest. It was just going to be a fun weekend.
There is no UFC this weekend, surprisingly enough. It's going
We're
to be our
getting ready
first
for
weekend
Fight
without that
Island.
in a while. They are getting ready for Fight Island, and there's also UFC 251 coming up, though. Let's get into our Beginner's Boulevard, though, because we're going to talk about another very basic term, the VIG. It's a charge paid on a bet to the bookie. So when you see minus 110, that 10 at the end, that means 10% of the returns are going to the bookie. So you're going to win 90% of what you bet. If you bet $10, you're going to get back $9. Or sometimes it's even $9.10. That might give you 91% of it back. These VIGs, they vary by sports books, though, Brett.
Yeah, I mean, it's always nice when you get that plus 100, right? The true even money, because that's so rare. You're always going to pay that VIG. And it's good just to know that.
Yes, but let's get into some sports because we have a big episode packed full of some stuff. The MLB, we're going to get into some betting talk right out the gate because Brett, the Oregon Sportsbook has some interesting player props for this short 60 game season, and it's home run totals with the likes of Mike Trout, JD Martinez, Giancarlo Stanton, Kyle Seager, Chris Davis, Alex Bregman, Acuna Jr., Anthony Rizzo, Mookie Betts, Alonso, Harper, Gallo, and Nelson Cruz. So some interesting names out here that you can do, and I like a few of them. None of them are more than I think about 17 and a half for the over-under of home runs hit. Some are down near like 13 and a half or 12 and a half though, and I'm eyeing those ones like with Acuna Jr., Yelich, and Harper.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely stay away from Trout. His wife is due with a baby, and I want to say August, I think. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but his wife is definitely due with a baby soon, and he could miss a day. He could miss 2 weeks because he leaves the bubble and has to quarantine. Like, that's a lot of home runs, or excuse me, that's a lot of at bats.
Or he might not be able to leave, and he might have to make the uncomfortable decision of not being there with his wife during that time. I was seeing that he is expected to play, and there isn't expected to be any Angels really missing from this roster. I even saw some recent news from the Angels general manager Billy Epler confirming on Tuesday that Shohei Ohtani is going to be playing the two ways that he initially came into the MLB, going to be pitching and doing some designated hitting. The Angels even said they might go with a six-man rotation for this shortened season. So, some interesting things to see there, but some good news for me and my MVP bet with Shohei Ohtani.
Yeah, the Angels added some arms in the offseason. They're not elite arms, but Julio Tiron and Bundy from the Orioles come over, and Obviously, they had Heaney last year, so they have some arms. They spent some money on arms, so I could definitely see them trying to expand the rotation and get all those guys in there. Especially like other teams, similar situations like the Mets, right? They add Porcello, they add Waka. They think, oh, we have depth. Well, maybe you just have more arms, and you can throw out there.
I would say I am leaning on those bets with Acuna Jr., Christian Yelich, and Bryce Harper hitting over 13 and a half home runs, mainly because of this uncertainty with the coronavirus and the increase of cases that we have seen. That I'm gonna wait till a little bit closer till the season's actually gonna happen before I would place them because we just saw today, Brett, Mexico canceled their baseball season due to coronavirus. It was expected to start on August 8th, but they're canceling that. The minor leagues, they're officially not playing at all and everything. So the MLB's trying to get something done, but I'm going to wait until it's a little bit closer before I actually put money back into the system with the MLB, I think.
Yeah, I mean the minor leagues are done for the year, so we like you said, we knew that. But it's always sad when you hear the announcement, right? Like even when you know
Yes,
something, it just hits home differently. Like
it's the
shit,
final nail in the coffin.
there's really no minor league baseball. Like we really only drafted 5 rounds worth of people this year.
The other reason I'm going to wait is also because there's some players that are deciding if they're going to opt in or opt out of the 2020 season. We've seen Ian Desmond opt out, Mike Leake, Ryan Zimmerman, Joe Ross. I mean, who's to say that they're going to be the last names, and who's to say that some more prominent names, Mike Trout, if he finds he can't leave the bubble and then come back because of his expected child, who's to say if he were to skip the season potentially? I mean, that would be a big blow to the Angels, and also with his name being out here with these future bets, it leaves some room for concern in a sense.
Yeah, I'm trying to stay optimistic because I want sports back as both a fan, as someone that does a podcast on sports and sports gambling. But being on, like Anthony Rizzo, he says he's going, right? But he's a cancer survivor. Like, if I'm the Chicago Cubs, do I want my face of the franchise traveling to play 60 games this year? Or do I want to maybe say, Rizzo, you're kind of really important to us. Why don't you just stay home and stay healthy this year? And that's not to say the Cubs should have final say on what Anthony Rizzo does, but Anthony Rizzo should definitely have the final say. But um, it's just a lot of things to consider.
And it's where some of these younger names might pop up in substitution and get some opportunities. I mean, we saw that the Detroit Tigers signed the number one overall pick of Torkelson and put him on the 60-day roster. The Angels, they did the same with a left-handed pitcher they drafted in the first round, Reed Detmers. He's the 56th player assigned to the summer roster for the Los Angeles Angels. So it's going to create some opportunity for these younger guys, and also it leaves room for these players that are either still recovering from a serious injury, are cancer survivors, like you mentioned with Rizzo, or Ian Desmond with social justice reasons. Just for whatever reasons players may want to sit out of these uncertain times, there's going to be some opportunity for some younger guys to be able to step up and fill some shoes.
Yeah, my guy Craig Mish said that the Marlins did the same thing with the number 3 pick, Max Meyer, signed him, put him on the 60 man. Um, I don't expect these super young players, these Bobby Witts, these Torkelsons, these Riley Greens, right? These elite prospects who are very young. I think it's more to get them in that whatever the taxi squad roster, almost like that extra 20
Hmm.
man roster, just practicing every day, being with the coaches, playing baseball. But you have enough injuries, you might have to call up some of these guys. No one expected Juan Soto to be in the majors as a 19-year-old, and then all of a sudden he's starting in center field. So crazy things can happen, and it's exciting to see that Torkelson, who was drafted number 1 overall less than a month ago, maybe exactly a month ago, somewhere in that range, He is now has the opportunity to go play professional baseball, and we weren't sure if that was going to happen this year.
And I think you mentioned one of the biggest parts of the opportunity that I'm talking about is being with the major league team, up with those coaches, up with that roster and that level of talent to gain that experience. I don't think you necessarily need to get the opportunity or the experience on the field for some of those young players to be able to treat this shortened season as a benefit towards their career moving forward. If they do get on the field for whatever reason, if it's be injured lists or getting called up from that taxi squad, as you put it, then so be it. But I think for some of these young guys that probably should be down in Class A, Class AA ball, if they're going to be on that taxi squad and they're going to be with the majors, they're going to be with those coaches, and they're going to be getting in those reps of practice, I think that's important for those guys, and it's going to be a valuable experience.
Yeah, again, can't hurt.
Absolutely. But Brett, before we move on from baseball, you can't talk about baseball on July 1st and not bring up Bobby Bonilla Day. And as a Met fan, I gotta ask you, do you have mixed feelings, bad feelings about the Bobby Bonilla Day that
I
comes
celebrate
around every
Bobby
year?
Bonilla Day. Like Yankee fans want to try and rub it. It doesn't bother me. I mean, what you think we're the first team to ever sign someone to a bad contract? like, like, yeah, it sucks. Whatever. We pay this guy a lot of money to not play for us, and we'll be paying him forever. But I saw you put a nice note in the rundown, and somehow this relates to us getting David Wright. So is it worth it? Might be worth it.
Yeah, Bobby Bonilla Day was making its way around Twitter again today, and I haven't seen this in previous years, but people were bringing up the fact that because of that deal, the Mets, if they never made that deal, wouldn't have had Mike Hampton, who ended up getting traded and they got a compensatory pick for, who ultimately became David Wright, who is in the hearts of every Mets fan. So
Well, and I'm going to
that
say
has to be a
this.
positive in a way.
I'm going to say this. The 2000 Mets, Mike Hampton was an ace. I mean,
Hmm.
Al Leiter was great. It was Mike Hampton who was the best pitcher on those 2000 Mets. And yes, we lost in the Subway Series to the Yankees, whatever. But that Mets team was a great ride. Hampton, Piazza, all those guys, David Wright. So yeah, absolutely worth it. And I'll always celebrate Bobby Bonilla Day. It's funny. Who cares?
Well,
Like there's so many bad contracts in sports. Like we just pick on the Mets. Just pick on the Mets.
if I remember correctly, the Bobby Bonilla contract goes until about 2030 or so. So I think
Yeah,
we have about another decade
2035.
of celebrating this day, and who knows, maybe a plaque should be put up once the Mets finally pay off
Just
that
retire his
contract.
number.
Let's jump into the NBA though, because since we're speaking about money, we found out on Wednesday that the NBA's continuation of their season at the Disney Resort in Orlando is expected to cost more than 150, excuse me, $150 million. That's an expensive price tag, quite the pretty penny.
Yeah, that's a lot of money, and there no guarantees for all this work that you're doing. FC Dallas, I'm not sure if you saw this, Higgins, but FC Dallas, who's also quarantining in Orlando and also playing at the Disney Wide World of Sports, they had six members of their team. It could include coaches also. So, six members of their organization or their team's traveling party test positive for COVID on Wednesday. And that's a bad sign because that could happen in the NBA. And if you lose six of 12 players, it's going to be tough to play.
Yeah, that is, I mean, basketball losing 6 of 12 players. You can technically still field a team, but there's not really any room for substitutions or foul outs at that point.
No, was eye opening when I saw that. You carry like 13 guys on an NBA roster. Like, oof.
That did just remind me, though, I don't know if you remembered this, of Alabama beating, I want to say Minnesota.
No, it was Oklahoma or it was
I want to say it was Minnesota, but they were playing 3-on-5
yeah.
because no, their bench and everyone got ejected. and Colin Sexton basically took over that game and won it for him.
Oh yeah, it was incredible. That was an odd thing. They didn't want to burn a red shirt, so they just played with four guys. Like
And
I'm,
then one guy fouled out, and it was down to three, and they
yeah,
still didn't want to burn the red shirt.
that Avery Johnson, man, wow. But that was an interesting thing. But what really got my attention on Tuesday from the NBA was Damian Lillard's quote. He has doubts about players following the safety protocols in Orlando. And like, I get it. These are men with a lot of money, and sometimes, they don't always make the greatest decisions ever. But I think when it comes to getting their money, most people put money first and will take the necessary precautions to make sure their paycheck still comes in.
I mean, I would hope that you're right with that, but we have seen these are very young men. They're making a lot of money. It's a rather steep hill that they climb very quickly in terms of financial growth. And like I said, they're very young, and that comes with the natural foolish decisions that young men can make. But Lillard said basically, quote, "My confidence ain't great." And he laughed with that on Wednesday, saying, "My confidence ain't great because you're telling me you're gonna have 22 teams full of players following all the rules when we have 100% freedom, everybody don't follow all the rules. I don't have much confidence, but hopefully it'll be handled to a point where we're not putting everybody at risk or in a dangerous position." I think what he says makes absolute sense. I mean, obviously there's going to be some people that test the limits. There's going to be some potential rule breakers. I mean, when you have 22 teams and you have this many people, it might not necessarily be a player. It could be a coach. It could be a trainer. Someone sneaking out at night just to get an extra snack or something when they shouldn't be doing that. But hopefully it minimizes the risk and it doesn't pose a greater risk to those on the court.
Yeah, no, I mean, he has every right to be nervous about that. I'd be nervous about that too, but these guys are going to get fined and they're going to lose game checks if they break this curfew, or, excuse me, if they go outside the bubble and don't do all the necessary things to come back into the bubble. Uh, I like to think that cash rules everything around me. Uh, and I think players think like that too. So if you want to collect your game checks and your sponsorship money and all that, I think you're probably going to follow the rules. But I think Dames raises fair points. Like, that's a lot of people to be keeping an eye on.
Talking about the bubble, though, we did also learn that NBA won't purely restrict a coach from being in Orlando just because of their age. I mean, they are going to evaluate those that are higher risk, but they said solely someone's age will not restrict them from being able to make it to Orlando, which I guess is good if these coaches want to be down there and they don't have other health risks, then that's their choice, I would say. But I would be worried about this. We've talked about the potential for coaches and just the age that is in the coaching system at all ranks of sports, really, and what it could impose to that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to bore our listeners with this, but it's Mike D'Antoni's in a tough spot. He's coaching with 0 years left on his deal. He is an older coach, and he'd like to continue coaching for his livelihood. So, what do you do in that situation? This guy has to go out there, and I'm not saying that the Rockets aren't going to resign. I mean, it doesn't seem like they'll resign him. Maybe another team will find interest, but what if he goes out there and wins the championship? Well, it's going to be tough for the Rockets to can him. Like, so if you're a guy like Mike D'Antoni, like, of course you want to be there. Alvin Gentry, another older coach, like, you have the best young team. Maybe not the best, but you have one of the top young teams in the league. You don't think that guy wants to be there as they're making their playoff push? Like, there are a lot of reasons that these coaches work their whole lives to get to this point to be head coaches in the NBA, and they don't want it to go away because now they're too old. So I definitely understand why the NBA is saying that. I do think everyone should, have health at top of mind. But Mike D'Antoni's a grown man; he can make his own decision.
I think D'Antoni is a very interesting name to bring up, and I think he definitely is feeling his heat to the fire because we have seen Houston Rockets general manager Daryl Morey make drastic changes to that roster, to the coaching staff, and do what he needs to do because he thinks they have the necessary tools to win, and they just need a few different pieces. So I wouldn't be surprised if it is all in this year on D'Antoni, and if that doesn't happen, maybe they do try to move on with Harden and Westbrook unless D'Antoni shows something very promising in this playoff scenario. But it's gonna be tough for some of these coaches that are dealing with some off the court issues, whether it be their age or their health, what have you, to battle that and focus on a season during this coronavirus epidemic. But Brett, we talked a little bit about the TBT. Let's get back into it though, because there were a lot of details that were released. I mean, it's starting on Saturday, July 4th, and the prize pot, it's been bumped up. It used to be $1 million. It's $2 million this year.
Yeah, it's been 2 million for a few years now, but you're right. It started off as $1 million prize pot. It has since doubled. All the games are going to be on ESPN. I want to say for the fifth year in a row, but definitely the fourth year in a row. Um, and what they're doing this year, that's obviously different for Corona reasons, is they're doing a quarantine bubble, similar to the NBA. All 24 teams will be quarantining in Columbus, Ohio, and playing all their games there. Kind of stinks. I liked how they were, as part of the fan voting, they were bringing the teams closer to like some home arenas so their fans could come, which was a fun little aspect of this little tournament. Um, but it's more important to have the tournament go on. So,
Yeah, they
uh,
used to do a March Madness kind of styled locations for their opening rounds, and then they'd kind of meet at a central location. Real quick, just mentioning that pot again, Brett. The $2 million is important because not all of these players are in the NBA or even currently professional basketball players still. I mean, Eric Devendorf with Syracuse, he's a coach.
yeah, he was a coach. He is not playing professionally. That's a great point.
So
Uh,
that 2 million means a lot to these players. They're not necessarily getting that salary that you think of with a professional basketball player, and that's why that bump from 1 million to 2 million was such a big deal because these guys they really want that prize money. They need that for various reasons.
Oh, definitely. I mean, the amount of G League guys playing in this and overseas guys, it definitely helps. And it's cool because it's winner take all. So, like, the winning team divides up that 2 mil. It's basically predetermined. You can see how much everyone's going to take home if they win on the website if you go there, if that's really interesting to you. But just some things to know if you're going to bet on this, which they announced today on Wednesday. They did it just for the podcast, just for us, Higgins.
Ooh,
They
very
said,
nice.
we're going to allow betting on the TBT this year with FanDuel. They're going to be our official partner. We're going to have daily fantasy basketball on the TBT. We're going to have gambling odds, and they said, and we're going to let the Next Best Bet podcast talk about it. So that was really nice of them.
Well,
um
Oregon doesn't have FanDuel, so I may have to ask in a favor from you or someone that I know that's in one of the states that FanDuel does some betting, because I would like to put some money on some Boeheim's Army. They look like they got a pretty good team this year. I mean, we mentioned Devendorf. Chris McCullough is a great name. Malachi Richardson, very talented guard who was with the Kings for a little bit. But they're also facing some other very talented crews. I mean, Ohio State, Aaron Kraft was a thorn in the side for many Syracuse teams during his tenure as a Buckeye. So I'm sure there are many in Orange that will not be happy to see him there. But these teams are always very interesting, and I'm very excited to see this tournament again.
yeah, a lot of fun. And again, things to note if you are going to bet or play daily fantasy on this: the Elam ending. All games end on a made basket. It's not time at the end. It's the exact Same thing that you saw in the All Star game this year. So if you enjoyed watching the NBA All Star game this year, you're going to love this tournament where winner takes home $2 million and every game comes down to a made basket. It's pretty cool. It was developed by like some professor at Ball State and named it after himself, but it's a good idea. You add a certain amount of points onto the winning team's score when there's about 3 minutes left in the game, and it's to calculate matches the correct winning percentage as if the game just finished out. But what it eliminates is all the fouling and dead time at the end of basketball games. You're just playing because both teams need to score to win.
Are you
So
sure it's named after a professor? Because I assumed it was named after Jason Elam, a kicker, and maybe it was just about someone kicking game-winning field goals, and you have to make a game-winning field goal in basketball to win the game.
that is a hilarious stretch, but yes, I'm positive the guy Elam named it after himself. And another thing that was kind of cool that's since made its way into March Madness that started in the TBT was you now see these teams they celebrate by putting their like team name farther up in the bracket, and that was a cool thing that started out of TBT. Lots of cool innovations. I'm excited to see what comes out of it this year, but like you said, it's definitely something I'll be watching. I look forward to betting on it, and yes, I'll be a homer rooting for Boeheim's Army.
It's also always nice to see the teams move their own names forward because each team does it a little differently. Sometimes it's whoever had the best game of the day, sometimes it's the entire team doing it together, sometimes it's the coach doing it. Every team kind of does that a little bit differently. Two other teams I did want to note about the TBT though. There is Team ALS Challenge and Playing for Jimmy V, so there's two charity teams as well within this bracket this year. So making it interesting. And they have some notable players as well. I mean, playing for Jimmy V has Hashim Thabit, Haywood Highsmith, and Josh Perkins.
Yeah, Highsmith spent a cup of coffee with the Sixers, and Josh Perkins was in summer league with the Hornets last year. But most notably, three Final Fours with Gonzaga. So pretty good there. And for ALS Challenge, you got Casper Ware, who played with the Sixers, was traded to Brooklyn, waived, but played with the Sixers. Malcolm Thomas, who spent a few years in the NBA, and Tyrese Rice. For big college basketball fans, you'll remember him at Boston College. He could shoot it from just about anywhere, and he's one of the top players in Europe right now. So he'll be a name to watch for sure.
Absolutely. Plenty of basketball news. And Saturday, after the hot dog eating contest, may just be tuning back and forth between the TBT and the Rocket Mortgage Classic for PGA Golf because we're going to get into that in a little bit. But I have a lot of golf bets coming up. Let's talk about some NHL real quickly. There's not a lot of NHL news since episode 55, but Brett, it looks like you may not go 2 for 2 with your hub cities. You were thinking Vegas and Toronto, but NHL seems like they might be shifting to doing two Canadian cities.
Yeah, well, I kind of agree with the NHL here. If
I do
everyone
too.
was wearing a mask here, maybe we'd be able to host hockey in Vegas. But if we're not flying everyone down to Vegas already, why send them there when we can send them to a country that seems to be a little more in control with their COVID problems? So I think the NHL is making a smart move here, and to be honest, I don't think either of us were like, yeah, COVID's gonna spike in July, and they're gonna have to move their hub cities again.
This is why we can't have nice things, America. See, Canada gets both hub cities now. Brett has to be wrong. All because Nevada's seen some spikes and they're not feeling as confident about Vegas. Vegas was what they most wanted to do because they were confident being able to create a bubble around T-Mobile Arena with the hotels there. Instead, it's looking like it might be Edmonton and Toronto. I'll be interested to see if those are the final two. I mean, they were also talking about Vancouver as well,
Well,
I
Vancouver
believe.
had some issues.
Vancouver's had some issues, so Edmonton, Toronto seem most likely, but they still haven't nailed them down yet. So we will see about that. Brett, I'm sorry that your Vegas was wrong. I was pulling for you to go 2 for 2 after I was going to go 0 for 2.
Well, you know what's funny is like I was right, and like the NHL would still like me to be right, but they just like you can't do it. You just
It's the responsible
there are
thing to do.
safer places to put it. Just put it there and play hockey.
For perspective of how the coronavirus is affecting the NHL right now, of the more than 250 players that have participated in voluntary workouts so far, they've all been tested. 15 have tested positive. It's a 6% positive rate, and there has been around 1,450 tests that have been completed since June 8th for these around 250 players. So 6%, we were talking about positive rates last week. MLS had a really low one, about 2.7. It seems like that number might be a little bit different now with FC Dallas, like you and I were talking about, Brett. But we'll see. The NHL still has to get their formal training camp under their feet. July 1st was the earliest start date they were going to be allowed to do that, and they haven't kicked it off yet. So we will see what the NHL's next steps are going to be and what the true scope of the problem is going to be once everyone's actually in the facilities.
Yeah, again, like I think the FC Dallas thing was super noteworthy because it happened in the bubble. Like
Yes.
that is concerning for all leagues. And I don't know how you solve that problem. Like the women's soccer league had a similar issue and they kicked out the Orlando team. Now it's in the women's soccer league, so some of our listeners may not have heard about it, but um I don't know if you could do that in the NBA. Just oh shit, the Spurs had 6 positive tests. Bye Spurs. like
I don't know. I don't think you can. I really don't think the reaction to that would be good both inside and outside of the league. I don't think that teams inside of the league would allow for a team to just get kicked out. I think the season would have to go back on pause or get canceled, honestly.
or me and you will have to fly to Orlando and suit up for the San Antonio Spurs. One of
Like
those three.
like Bill Murray in Space Jam. Ba 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 ba.
I hope you come out there in a backwards hat.
Always. I mean, have you seen our
Always.
logo? We're both always wearing a backwards hat. Also, just like Bill Murray, I don't
Just
play
like
defense.
okay. Defense, listen to this guy.
I don't play defense. Some slightly other news in the NHL. There has been some news about Ilya Sorokin and the New York Islanders. We've mentioned this guy's name a few times, a goaltender coming out of Russia. With the coronavirus, there were some thoughts that maybe, just maybe, he would be joining the squad for the expanded playoffs, but that does not seem to be the case. The NHL has ended up tweaking their rules on signed draft picks that they cannot come in midseason, and instead, it looks like Sorokin will join the team at the beginning of 2020-2021 season.
Well, such is the way the Islanders go about
Operate.
life. Yeah, it's just never easy for the Islanders. Split time between two arenas, can't get your goalie over, lose your best player to the Maple Leafs. Like, just a whole mess of situations for the Islanders. But he will come over in 2020, 2021. So he will be here eventually, Islander fans. And uh, I imagine he'll be pretty good when he comes. A lot of people think he's the best goalie outside of the NHL right now. So always good to add a good goalie to your roster.
And speaking of the Islanders, we spoke earlier about Bobby Bonilla and bad contracts and how Mets aren't the only team to ever do that. The New York Islanders, Rick DiPietro, their goalie, he signed a 15-year deal that was worth $4.5 million back in 2006. So technically, they're still paying for that, but $4.5 million compared to what the NHL was then and now, that's not as terrible of a deal, I would say. And even Bobby Bonilla is making more than that, honestly.
I mean, it's just yeah. I mean, another team, of course, another blue and orange Long Island, New York team, paying athletes who are retired. It's a great trend.
So the NFL, some quick news from there before we get into our actual picks this weekend. The only news that we really saw out of the NFL, really since Cam Newton getting signed, is that The preseason is officially going to be 2 weeks, according to sources at ESPN. They've effectively canceled their week 1 and week 4 schedules for the preseason, including the Hall of Fame game that would have been on August 8th. And this is some glimpses at the NFL's first signs of worry, in a sense, to their schedule, it seems.
Well, I mean, before we get to that, we got to get to the real big NFL news. Jay Cutler's chicken killer was a raccoon, according to Diana Rossini. Now that that's off, we can finally get back to the 2 game preseason. And I think this is what everyone wants. I think people get bored with the 4 preseason games. It's not necessary. Um, I think it should be this way probably moving forward to reduce injuries and all this stuff. But you get to, if you're an NFL owner, if you're a team, right, if you're the league, you charge regular season ticket prices for these games, so you're never going to get rid of them. But this will be a nice assuming the NFL kicks off, which God only knows. But if the NFL kicks off, I look forward to the shortened 2 game preseason. I am a big fan of that. I think that's great.
We will see. I agree. It has been a point of contention between the players and the owners for a while of trying to roll back those preseason games. And who knows? Maybe this will be the start of actually implementing that if the owners can see that it goes well. Maybe there's higher attendance rates if there's only 2 preseason games that you can go to in August instead of stretching it out through 4 possibilities. Maybe the true fans that like the preseason games will fill up those stadiums for those 2 ones. Who knows?
Yeah,
But
I think the truth of the matter is it all comes like Wu Tang Clan said, cash rules everything around me,
I think that's
and
becoming a theme of this episode.
it is, and it's important to note because why is the NBA inviting non-playoff teams back to get that revenue, the TV revenue? Why is baseball trying to get any sort of season up so they don't pull in zero revenue dollars for this year? Like, why is the NFL play four preseason games? Excuse me. Well, they play it because they sell the ticket prices to the season ticket holders for the same price as a regular season game, and that's 2 more games they have to buy. So it all adds up, and it's unfortunate for the consumers, but that's the world we live in, Higgins.
And speaking about money, I actually forgot to mention this in the NHL when we were talking about Edmonton and Toronto being the likely hub cities. But it's actually cheaper for the NHL to host up in Canada than it is in America. And the NHL could lose more than $1 billion if the season weren't to happen. So any way they can cut their costs a little bit helps that bottom line, absolutely. But let's get into this weekend because, like I mentioned earlier, there is no UFC on July 4th this weekend, but there is a different battle that we can talk about, Brett. I don't know how much you want to talk about it, but the hot dog eating contest, the Nathan's hot dog eating contest, it is happening. And Joey Chestnut, there's some betting lines out there. The New Jersey, for the first time ever, is allowing sports betting on hot dog eating contests. This has never happened before. And I was looking at some early lines at it the other day, and the over under is at like 64 and a half, and he's a minus 1600 favorite with the field being plus 700. You could take the entire field, anybody, and it's plus 700 if they win.
The world of competitive eating, huh? Uh, do you know any of the other competitors? Like, I only know Joey Chestnut.
Well, there used to be Kobayashi who
Yeah, there used to be
he
Kobayashi,
faced
but
off against. I can't think of other names off the top of my head, but I guarantee you, once I see them on TV, I'll be like, "Oh yeah, that guy with the mask. I remember him." And
that
oh
guy
yeah, the
with the
guy with the last
mask.
name Stoner. Yeah, I remember him. And wait, how many Pizza Hut pizzones did this guy eat? That's disgusting. Like,
you'll you'll say the guy with the mask for all of them. Oh, that guy with the mask? Yeah, he was there last year. Oh, that guy with the mask. um yeah, I mean Kobayashi obviously was I mean, he was it before Joey Chestnut, but I don't think he's been around for a little bit. I mean, I
He
could be,
left the game. Actually, there was a 30 for 30 that was made about
yeah,
it that was beautifully done and kind of talked about it a lot.
yeah. That when he lost to Chestnut, it was over for him. He was like ruined.
So I found the link finally. We tweeted this out earlier to someone that asked us actually about the betting on the hot dog eating contest and if we thought that Joey Chestnut would win again. And honestly, I don't see anyone else winning. I think this man is just a machine when it comes to it, and it's why he's minus 1600. But there's even odds on how much he beats the second place finisher by. They're giving 15 and a half hot dogs.
I'll probably take under.
You think Joey Chestnut wins by less than 15 and a half?
Yeah, like even
Well,
if he
you would
win,
get
if
that
he
at
wins
plus
by
105.
15 hot dogs, I win.
Yeah, you'd get that, and you'd get that at plus 105.
That I might have a good 10-minute bet there.
Yeah. Now, the big question is, will he once again break his own record, world record of 74 hot dogs eaten in 10 minutes? And I hope not. How high can this number get? 74 hot dogs in 10 minutes is too much as it is. I hope it doesn't get broken again. But maybe he does.
Do you think this is an event you train for, or you just kind of
Absolutely.
walk in?
He's a professional eater.
No, he's a professional eater, but like how many days leading up to this do you think he had hot dogs?
So I remember seeing an E60 on Kobayashi before Chestnut's time, and it was talking about how you eat lots of lettuce because that expands your stomach. He would eat brats because they're thicker, so it would help simulate the hot dog and make the hot dog seem easier come the day of competition. But they didn't really talk much about eating hot dogs regularly before.
Yeah, so that's kind of what I was thinking, cause like if I ate like 100 hot dogs 2 days ago, the last thing I'd want is a hot dog. So,
I agree. I agree.
but let's get to the PGA Tour because I think we've spoken about hot dogs longer than they'll be eating them.
Yes. So the Rocket Mortgage Classic is taking place at the Detroit Golf Club, and this is a golf course where the winning score is going to be very, very low. It is last year, I believe it was around 25 under par. Last week we saw at the Travelers Championship the winners being around 20 under par. People are playing well coming out of this coronavirus epidemic. The leaderboard has been full, it has been tight, and it has been really, really good scores. So I'm very interested in the Oregon Scoreboard, which is the name of the sports book out here ran by the Oregon Lottery. They had some interesting specials up, Brett. There's three names in each of these, and they give you odds. If any of those names win, you cash out. So Bryson DeChambeau, Brendan Todd, and Victor Hovland at plus 400. Any of those wins, it cashes. Kevin Na, Tyrell Hatton, and Ricky Fowler at plus 700. And Webb Simpson, Tony Finau, and Bubba Watson at plus 600. So basically, I'm getting 9 different names at 3 units. It's, I think, a great value in a sense. And there were even a few other names up there that were at higher odds that I was thinking about, but because of the one being at plus 400, I wanted to leave myself some room for cashing out in a sense.
Yeah, I think the Hovland DeChambeau group makes sense, especially because DeChambeau's plus 600 on his own, so you might as well get two more names in there. Uh,
Absolutely.
yeah, I mean, he's priced so ridiculously this week. It's just like kind of soured everything for me. Hovland's price, his price point and how he's been playing, and I've been listening to some people talk about it. He seems to be the hot bet this week. People are very high on Hovland. He's going off at about like plus 2,000, I think. Um, and that one seems to make the most sense, but I like the way you did it with these little groups. I think that's kind of a cool little thing, and you get 9 golfers as opposed to three, so that's really interesting.
Yeah, I also have a few other bets. I'm going to be all over on this golf, to be honest. I have two round one bets. One is that Kevin Na beats Brant Snedeker by the end of day one, and the other one is Victor Hovland beats Hideki Matsuyama by the end of round one. Kevin Na's minus 120 against Snedeker, while Hovland is minus 110 versus Matsuyama. The interesting part about this, even though I have Kevin Na beating Snedeker on Thursday, I think Brant Snedeker is gonna have a good week and he's gonna finish in the top 10. And I'm taking him to finish in the top 10 at plus 400. He finished in the top 5 last year. He's close to getting the pieces together. He played well at the Travelers, finished at minus 8. Just didn't quite have it on Sunday, shot a 70, but 3 of those days he had in the mid 60s. I think he might be getting those pieces together, and this week we may see him get all those wheels in motion and be able to get punch his way into that top 10. And then the last golf bet that I have, Brett, we saw me do this a few weeks ago. I'm going to go back to the well on there being no hole in one. And it's just simply because hole in ones are really difficult to get. And I understand it's a large field of over 100 golfers, but hole in ones, those chances are really low even for the best golfers in the world. And at plus 110, if you can get no hole in one for positive money, I think you take that. So I'm placing a unit on that as well. And those are my seven. That is right, seven golf bets.
Jeez, big weekend for Higgins, and we haven't even gotten into the NASCAR yet.
Yeah, we'll see what I'll be eating for lunch next week.
Either calamari or pizza rolls.
Oh, it's gonna be one or the other. I'll be either eating like a king or I'll be eating some college student ramen.
Maybe you should stick to your Chinese basketball But NASCAR this weekend, they go from having fans to not having fans in Pennsylvania and another weekend of no fans in Indianapolis. I'm going to let you say the name because it was such a great name, but the race was at the Brickyard Motor Speedway in Indianapolis. And it should be a good race, but why don't you tell us what it is?
It is possibly the best NASCAR race name that I've heard in a long time. The Big Machine Hand Sanitizer 400. This sounds like a college bowl game, Brett.
Yeah, I want the big hand sanitizer college football bowl game for Syracuse specific. I would buy every T-shirt.
And honestly, during the coronavirus right now, what better marketing that for a hand sanitizer when it needs to be used so badly right now? Everyone should have some hand sanitizer with them. I just got some new hand sanitizer today, actually. Big Machine. I've never heard of this hand sanitizer brand, but might have to take a look at it now because they're getting their name out in sports. I think it's a very smart marketing idea.
Yeah, I mean, when lightning strikes, right? So
Yeah.
this was I had a good laugh when you told me that the name of the race was the Big Machine Hand Sanitizer 400. You were spot on in saying it should be a college football bowl game. It absolutely should be the Indianapolis College Football Bowl game.
At
Um,
Lucasfield.
Wherever, fucking play it at the Brickyard. I don't care. Make the infield the
Play
football
it at
field.
in the infield of the Brickyard.
Yeah,
I
go
love it.
for it. That's perfect. Uh, but yeah, I'm all for it. And I know you have some bets already. I do not have any bets yet, but I will be on it on come Sunday.
Yes, you will need to follow us on social media because Brett will be posting his picks this weekend and he will have some for that NASCAR there and maybe he'll even have some for some golf later on through this week. Make sure to follow us. It's going to be right above us in the banner in case you're not watching though. That's at NBB Pod on Twitter, at Next Best Bet on Instagram, and the Next Best Bet Facebook page. And if you are not watching, you really should. The Next Best Bet YouTube channel, we just launched it. All of our content's going there. And if you don't have time for a full podcast episode, we're cutting out the individual episodes by sport and we're posting clips like that as well. But let's get to my NASCAR picks, Brett, because I picked two names that have raced really well over the past 2 weeks and in the past three races, honestly. Denny Hamlin at Pocono. was fantastic. He finished behind Kevin Harvick on Saturday, and then he finished ahead of Kevin Harvick on Sunday. They went 1-2, 1-2 in between those 2 days. I think Denny Hamlin beats Kyle Busch, and he's at minus 105. He's the slight underdog, so I like those odds. And then Eric Almirola, this is a name that I'm becoming familiar with over the past month or so as I've watched more NASCAR, and he's facing Clint Boyer, and he has raced really, really strong over the past few weeks. Last week didn't necessarily take his last pit stop when at the most optimal time, and it dropped him outside of the top 10, I believe. But I think that he beats Clint Boyer, and he is also at minus 105. So both of those, I think, are pretty good value, being almost even money, and the VIG being only 5%.
Yeah. Oh, good. Way to tie in the beginner's boulevard. I like that.
Tossing
Um,
in the beginner's boulevard always.
Always. No, that's why it's the best segment, man. We teach and then we take our lessons and apply them. So that's great.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I like the Alamora over Boyer as well. Hamlin and Bush, that one's too close. Those are two of the top racers. I'd probably stay away from that one because what's the saying in football? Any given Sunday. I think that applies in this head-to-head matchup in NASCAR.
You're right. Hamlin and Kyle Busch should be close, but if you think about it like this, last week at Pocono, Kyle Busch is really good at Pocono. He had won 3 of the last 5 times before last weekend. And he did not race well last week, including he crashed on Sunday.
Yeah,
So Denny Hamlin, who has been racing very well instead, he was having tremendous handling of that car Saturday, but Sunday specifically when he went away and got that win and just torched the crowd so he could go and get a pit stop and still be in first. I think Hamlin and Almirola are going to be two solid wins. Maybe I'll find myself trying to bet on an overall winner. We'll see closer to Sunday, though. I also saw the Pennzoil 150s going on Friday. I don't have any picks for that yet, but I'm going to be taking an eye out and make sure to look out for that on social media as we're going to be posting picks for that. Maybe for the hot dog eating contest. Maybe posting my MLB futures. Who knows? Plenty to be betting on as these weekends shape up in July. And more sports are coming back, Brett. It feels like they're coming.
yes, sir. Can't wait.
This has been episode 56 of The Next Best Bet. For Brett, I'm Jake. We have a packed full weekend, and we will be giving you more picks as well as we get closer to the events that we just talked about. We'll talk to you after the weekend.